I'm so excited to be here and to have the opportunity to introduce our inaugural keynote speaker, Professor Gerd Gigerenzer. Professor Gigerenzer is Director of the Holding Center for Risk Literacy at the Max Planck Institute for Human Development in Berlin, and he is founder of partner of Simply Rational, the Institute for Decisions. He is former director of the famous Adaptive Behavior and Cognition Center at the Max Planck Institute for Human Development and at the Max Planck Institute for Psychological Research in Munich, and former professor of psychology at the University of Chicago. He has studied the use of rationality and heuristics in decision-making over the past 20 years. He is a strong proponent of simple heuristics that in many situations, heuristics can be better than optimization and make more accurate decisions with less effort. Aside from his talents and advocacies, Professor Gigerenzer is also a prestigious author of many popular books. Some of his better-known titles include his award-winning books, Calculated Risks, How to Know When Numbers Deceive, Gut Feelings, The Intelligence of the Unconscious, and my favorite, Simple Heuristics That Make Us Smart. We are grateful for his presence among us today and for the speech of Simple Heuristics that make us smart. And so without further delay, please join me in welcoming Professor Gerd Gigerenzer.
Let's begin with a puzzle. The physicist Max Planck once told the economist John Maynard Keynes that in early life he had thought about studying economics, but he found it too difficult. Too difficult, you might think. Planck, the originator of quantum theory, could easily have mastered the entire mathematical corpus of economics in a few days. But Max Planck didn't mean the math. He meant the psychology, the uncertainty in human affairs, and the lack of precise knowledge handled by some blend of logic, intuition, and experience. Yet few economists and also cognitive scientists have dared to study what Planck meant, the uncertainty in our lives. Rather, they have devoted their life to model situations where it's assumed that market participants have full knowledge about the future, or that ordinary persons are Bayesians in the sense that they have all kinds of rational a priori distributions, all alternatives are known, all consequences are known, everything is certain. This talk today will be about the alternative to studying certainty. There have been a number of attempts to model behavior under genuine or fundamental uncertainty. So that is when you do not know all the alternatives, all the consequences, all the probabilities. And in economics, Keynes is famous for having concepts like and also night before, like, oh, it's intuition, it's judgment, it's animal instincts. And some modern economists have written books about animal spirits. And if you read carefully, there's nothing concrete in it, or not much. And so there's an entire task about how can we get more precise in modeling decision-making under uncertainty. And that's what I want to talk about today. And here is the key distinction. This is the distinction that's very fundamental to everything I will talk about. And it's also a distinction that is as often denied as possible. So the terms risk and uncertainty are typically used as synonymous, and thereby the problem of how to deal with uncertainty, so Marx Planck's and Keynes' problem, is just left out. So I'll define a situation of risk as one where we know all the alternatives. It's like in a lottery. And we know all the outcomes, so all the prices that you get in a lottery, and all the probability. And then the problem is also made so that you can determine the optimal answer depending on some criteria like maximizing expected value or expected utility or anything. And this vision about risk has become the key template of many ways where risk is studied in psychology, in economics, in philosophy, and other fields. It gives you a kind of feeling of certainty because everything is known, nothing can happen. It's the ideal world if you're a manic compulsive person, then you want to have control of everything. That's the kind of work. And that doesn't mean that this hasn't resulted in important work. And there's the error de Breu, there's the in economics and finance the Markowitz line, and there are many good and valuable results. But the key problem is if you believe that these results also hold in a world of uncertainty. And it's very clear that this is totally open to the question. So, a world of uncertainty is one in which one does not know all of these components, where the future is not knowable, even you don't know the probability or the distribution. And that appears to hold in most interesting situation in which we are. So, the where to invest, whom to marry, what to do with the rest of your life. You just can't know all the alternatives. And often, in the real world, the alternatives are not sitting there. By acting, you make the alternatives. And for instance, so the position I have is the following. We do have situations that are fairly close to the risk situation. And we have situations that are highly uncertain, and most of them have components in between. And we need to realize that we need two different sets of tools to deal with these situations. So probability theory is the answer to situations of risk. And that's what Ian Hacking called the taming of probability in 1654. Here's a precise date. That's the exchange of letters between two famous French mathematicians, Fermat and Pascal. But the taming of probability tamed only part of probability. And actually, one of the major inspirations for this theory of tamed uncertainty, that is probability, was gambles. And so monetary gambles, and they were always a world of certainty, where even the probabilities were certain. So that's the world of risk. And the big error is now to believe that you make progress and actually make useful theories if you pretend that all situations are one of risk. And that's my objection here. Often, Jimmy Savage is quoted as the father of behavioral Bayesian decision theory, not the behavioral one. And if you read Jimmy Savage in his 1954 book, he explicitly makes a similar distinction when he says that his own theory works for situations where the state space is known for sure and nothing new can ever happen. And Savage gives, interestingly, and almost never quoted, 2 examples for where his theory doesn't work. The first one is an example about uncertainty. He says it would be utterly ridiculous to apply Bayesian decision theory to the situation of planning a picnic. And he gives the answer why. Because things can happen that you do not know before. It's about the future. And planning a picnic is not like running a business. That just shows you by implication that Savage had a quite understanding about the limits of his theory. The other example he gave was playing chess. And playing chess, different from planning a picnic, is a situation that's well defined, but it's computationally intractable. You cannot find the optimal solution, although we know there exists one. And also no chess program can find the optimal solution. So this is just a reminder. So what do I say? We need to distinguish between situations of risk on the one side and situations of uncertainty. And we need to think seriously how to develop a toolbox for dealing with uncertainty. We need to take Savage seriously, rather than pretending we have one hammer and all problems are nails. In Bayesian words, we have one base rule and all problems are posterior probabilities. Or in other ways, all problems are maximizing utility. So that's not the message here. So how to go along and develop a precise formulation for dealing with uncertainty that goes beyond animal spirits and words like creativity and something like that. The way we have engaged in that is following up where Herbert Simon left us. Simon was a truly interdisciplinary person who knew amazingly many things. I was always surprised getting a letter from Simon. Dan Goldstein and I once wrote a paper on the origin of the computer metaphor. So how it's a very interesting story. Now, sometimes people believe or still believe that the mind is like a computer. Having computation. And the interesting story is that originally the analogy went in the other way. So in Babbage's time, a system of work, so people like you were called a computer. Everyone did something, and the entire system generated immensely great things. And Herbert Simon wrote back. He read the paper. And it turned out that he knew at least as much as we about these types of things. So, Simon is usually quoted as the father of bounded rationality. But what did he mean with that? And the first point I want you to understand is that there are 3 different conceptions of bounded rationality. And have very little in common with one another. And are typically confused. So, Simon's question about bounded rationality is here quoted on the top. He asked, how do humans reason when the conditions of rationality postulated by the model of neoclassical economics are not met? What are these conditions postulated by neoclassical economics? Now, that's not always clear, but the typical answer is it's the axioms of consistency. So like there's completeness, there's transitivity, there's independence, and there's an Archimedean axiom that then, if they're fulfilled, guarantee that you can represent choice by a utility function. But these axioms are not trivial. Even completeness, that you always have a preference between A and B and all these things is typically not fulfilled, and it's also not reasonable. So if you have 20 parties to vote for, all you need to know is whom you vote for, but not have a transitive or complete relationship between all pairs, 20 times 9 times, divided by 2, that's 190 pairs. That could be called irrational if you waste your time on this kind of problems, just to illustrate it. So, and if you don't have completeness, you can't have transitivity. And independence is anyhow a controversial axiom, so these axioms are not trivial, in a sense. And if people violate this axiom, that need not to be unreasonable. It may actually be reasonable. So that's what he means. So how can we understand rationality in a different way? And here are 3 key features that he postulated for research on bounded rationality. So first, bounded rationality is not, as Kahneman later twisted the term, about your own irrationality. No. It is, the rationality is bounded. It's maybe not the best term. This is why we use the term ecological rationality later. It's in the ecology that's the problem. The goal is uncertain. So that's the problem, the limitation. It's not the internal. That's Kahneman's view. It's never in the outside, it's always in you. No, that wasn't Simon's idea. So here are the 3 principles of Simon's research. So study uncertainty, not only risk. So he didn't use the term uncertainty. He subscribed it there. The original distinction with risk and uncertainty is from Frank Knight, economist. But if you read Knight's brilliant book, he makes lots of very interesting claims, namely, you can't make profit unless there is uncertainty. You can't make profit in the world of risk. So in the world of economics, you can make money. But on the other hand, if you want to find out now what to do now, in situation of uncertainty, then Knight is as mute as Keynes. So it's intuition, it's judgment. That's all true, but not precise. So first study uncertainty, not risk. And that's what we will do in this summer institute. There will be one exception. So Michel will talk about risk, particularly risk literacy. So how to understand and communicate probabilities, those situations where we have fairly good evidence. And it's about another very important problem that in much of risk communication, most people have never been trained to understand probabilities. And one can easily confuse people, and most doctors are confused, and most lawyers are confused. But the beauty is that nobody notices it. So here's a simple example. An American weather forecaster once announced in TV the weather, and he said the probability that it will rain on Saturday is 50%. The probability that it will rain on Sunday is also 50%. Therefore, he concluded, the probability that it will rain on the weekend is 100%. We laugh about that, but do you know what it means if you hear, if you read on your app that the probability that it will rain tomorrow is 30%. So 30% of what? Now, we've done a large study in many countries. I live in Berlin. Most Berliners think it means it will rain tomorrow in 30% of the time. That's 7 to 8 hours. Others think it means it will rain tomorrow in 30% of the area. So most likely not where I live. Most Americans that we have tested think the Berliners have no idea what's going on. it means something third, namely, it will rain on 30% of the days for which this announcement has been made. And that's actually what the meteorologists mean, but have not learned to communicate. So the problem is here, it's a very simple example now about limits of risk literacy, that a single event probability that it will rain tomorrow, it's a single event probability, by definition has no reference class attached. And people guess the reference class, it could be days, region, or time. And if you're smart, then you can guess very different reference classes. So one woman in New York told us, I know what 30% rain means. 3 meteorologists think it rains, and 7 don't. So that's the topic of risk literacy. So even in studying risk, there's lots of interesting things to be done, and you will hear more in the 2 lectures that Michelle is giving. So, but we'll deal with uncertainty, the big challenge. The second goal Simon's research has is to model how people and institutions actually make decisions, not to produce as-if models. So expected utility maximization is an as-if model. Nobody believes that we would make decisions like that. And economists are usually very clear and say, it's not about, we are not claiming that people make that. We are just showing that we can, at least after the fact, explain behavior, that decisions are made as if they would maximize something. Then you need the axioms, if you are clear, and then of course you get into problems before. So, as if models may sometimes be reasonable, but this is certainly not the goal of understanding how people make decision making. Also, an as-if model doesn't help any institutions who wants to know from me, what should I do now? Just maximize your utility. What do you do now? So we want to have process models about what to do. And they're typically, in uncertain situation, the following holds. This is a general law, not always true, but mostly. The more uncertainty there is, the simpler your rules should be. If you're in a world, on the other hand, where you know all details, nothing will ever change, like a risk, then you make complex models. And you see this in actual decision theory. The most complex models, like cumulative prospect theory, are made for the most trivial problems under risk, choice between gaps. So here's an example from the other side. If you go in the real world decision making, then you find often experts using definite heuristics that are amazingly simple. So I had a conversation a few weeks ago with an investor who invests billions, and his target are hospitals. He buys hospitals, brings them into shape, and sells them. That's the business. Now, how can one know, so here's a hospital, is it worth the price or not? So how, and now maybe what should you do? If you're a rational person, you may go through all the papers, work and paperwork and paperwork and paperwork, endless. But if you're a rational person, you also know that you can't trust that because it's all twisted. So what do you do? This man has a very simple heuristic. He's just looking at 3 things. He goes into the hospital, and the first thing is smell. The second thing is he goes into the individual rooms and looks at the patients, how they're doing. And the third is he looks how the nurses are doing. Now Now you could say, oh, that's too little. You shouldn't look at everything, but look at everything, just try it. So, heuristic decision making is the art to figure out the few important cues and ignore the rest. That's it. And you may fail on that. Just like you may fail if you do a deep neural network and try to solve this problem. And the question is, can we determine situations where one or two cues is sufficient or better than analyzing everything, and where the opposite is? And that's the question of ecological rationality. Herbert Simon had a metaphor of the stair of scissors. That was his idea of rationality. And so he thinks to understand successful behavior, you need to look at two things. Cognition, the strategies, but that's not enough. You need also look at the environment, but the problem. And the question is then to figure out how these two blades meet. That's the question. And here you can see that the many programs in psychology only look at the cognitive blade. They talk about system 1, system 2, all kind of Bayesian algorithms, it's only cognitive. And on the other hand, there are disciplines like sociology who only look at the environmental side. So we need to find a way to flesh out Simon's metaphor. Simon only got so far to the metaphor. And the study of ecological rationality is fleshing that out. That's a key contribution that we have made. So that's the three basic principles. So dare to study uncertainty and go beyond words like animal spirits. Then model decision making. It's still a model. Like what this heuristic with go to the hospital and smell and then look at the patients and the nurses. It is probably also his own model about what he's doing. In reality, he will sometimes look at other things. But try to model that as opposed to having as-if models. And finally, don't think that you can understand rationality by mere internal consistency. And try to flesh out what is the ecological rationality of strategies. So a simple example besides that is, so many people use a very simple heuristic when it's about their own health. The heuristic is trust your doctor. Do whatever the doctor says. Now, this is neither a bad nor a good heuristic because you're looking only at one blade. In order to understand whether it works, you need to look at the other blade, the environment. And here, typically, three features that are very important is, does the doctor know the evidence from medical research? First question. If he knows, fine, heuristic. Second, has the doctor conflicts of interest? So, between pursuing something else than you're the best for you, like monetary goals. And third is defensive decision making. Does the doctor want to defend him or herself against you suing the doctor if something goes wrong? A big problem in the US, less a problem in Europe. I don't know about India here. So if these three, if you answer as all, the doctor understands, the doctor has no conflict of interest and doesn't do practice defensive decision making, then the heuristic is one that's ecological rational in this situation, but if they don't hold, it's not. But that's the key understanding. That also makes clear that any statements that heuristics are error-prone or whatever is itself an error-prone statement. You need to flesh out what the other side is. Got this. So what I will do now is to give you one example to illustrate how heuristics are used in the world of business by companies. And then go more systematically on a more theoretical level through the notions of adaptive toolbox and ecological rationality. So that's the program. In the rest of the winter school, you will get more and more hands-on and down to the earth methods. And Konstantinos will today talk about an entire class of heuristics that are well tuned to uncertainty, fast and fruity trees. But I will start with a general example and then go into the more abstract notion, because this is also a message I want to convey. If you think the goal of science is to find the right answers, that's not enough. You first need to find the right questions. And we too often give the right answers to the wrong questions. And this is called the so-called type 3 error. To find the right answers to the wrong questions. So type 1 and type 2 errors, I assume you know, that's a typical statistical terminology, but it's a much more serious one. And we often fail on that. So if you want to understand how humans make decisions in the real world, and then study experimental games, like the ultimatum game, then we're committing the type 3 error. So, here's the example I want to start. Assume you have a used car dealership, a large used car dealership, and a BMW car dealership. A new car comes in, a used car, you have to price it. How do you do it? Now, just think a moment. What would you do? So there are economic models. You could do big data analysis. What correlates with what? Maybe even targeted prices for every person, different person. So here's a personal story. When I like to drive BMWs, and when my old BMW, when BMW was 15 years old and showing ailments, I was looking up to buy another one. And I always used to buy one that's about a year old or 2 year old, because then the price is already 50% down. And so then you exploit people who want to have always a new car. So I went to so a good strategy is you go to the largest used BMW dealer in the world, which happens to be in Munich, not so far away, where I live. And so I went there. And then I saw 2 cars next to one another, which looked identical in every respect. And you went through the mileage was the same, the year was the same, what's inside was the same, everything the same, except the price, which was substantially different. So being curious, I asked the salesman, what's the difference with the cars? So there's really no difference. So, and why the different price? He said, oh, that's how we price it. So I got curious about how they price it. Do you have an idea how it can be? Now assume they are really the same, as similar as again. How can the price be different? Yes.
Anchoring effect.
Anchoring. What is anchoring effect?
You give a high price so that the cheaper option
It's better.
quite reasonable to you and quite cheap, so you go for.
So they purposely do this. Yeah. That's the kind of unfortunate type of explanation. Yeah, that's okay. Another idea?
Maybe it depends on who was the earlier user of the car.
Sorry?
Who was the earlier user of the car? Who owned the car earlier?
Who owned the car?
Yes.
So they sold it at different prices. Yeah. That could be also a reasonable explanation.
Number of kilometers that the cars have
So it's identical for X.
Yeah. So now think, yeah, the whole interesting thing. So I interviewed the salesman, how they price the BMWs in Munich, and he told me something that was, without him using the word, Herbert Simon's satisficing strategy. Now, this is a story he told me. Look, the car comes in, so we'll price it above the average. Then we'll wait a month. If it's sold, fine. If not, you go down. And always keep the 99 in the back. We'll go down to 5% or 5 and 10. Then we'll wait another month. If it's not been sold, we go down. And that's until it's being sold. And he said, now, the car with the 24,000 just came in yesterday. He was want to see it for 2 months. And then I did it. Just a consequence of the pricing strategy. So I got really curious whether that's true. And asked one of my smart postdocs then, Florian Ottinger. So we did a study, and today it's very easy to follow the pricing. You go on the internet. And we looked for 18 months. All BMW 3, all BMW 7 types, so the cheap and the big types, and followed them, whether that's true. And also we did interviews with many of them. And what we found is, here, this figure, so you have the price. And can you see the red? It's a little bit hard to see it. And the price is held. This is the most frequent strategy, and it's based on over 600 BMW dealerships and thousands of cars. So the price is held for about, this is about 24 days on average, and it goes down, goes down, goes down. Note, different from most economic optimization theories, there is no fine-tuning. So an economics theory would say you fine-tune it every day on demand and so on, as some supermarkets do. There's nothing like that. They just keep and keep and keep and keep. But there's variation. You basically have 3 parameters: how far you start, how high you start, how long you hold, and how far you go down. And if the situation, if you are in a rural area, they start higher, keep it longer, and then go down. If it's the red line is for city, many competitors, and you react rather finally. And there's a third strategy, which is satisficing with no adaptation. You just keep the price forever. What you see here is that if you, in terms of dealers, there are 628 dealers we studied. The majority, so slightly more than 0.5%, the red ones, follow the red strategy. That's roughly the 4 weeks strategy. Then the green strategy is another 27%, and a minority does the 22 does the satisficing strategy without adaptation. And then also they sell few cars. You can see on the other side. If you look at it in terms of cars sold, then the majority has the aspiration-led strategy. So here we have an analysis where you start not with an experimental game, like investment game or something that you make up yourself. But we start with a problem seen in the real world, so the cheap twin paradox. The same dealership, it's not too different, but price the same car differently. That's a kind of paradoxical situation. And then you bring this situation in the laboratory, or you use the data on the internet and analyze the problem and find the best model for this strategy. And 99% of the dealers use a satisficing strategy, and these are the three how it divides up. So BMWs. So depending on whether it's an urban or rural, and whether you go immediately, if you do with a dealer who is keeping it in the blue line constant, then you just be the first one there, because the best buy. And if you're in a big city, then you just wait until it's going down and you roughly know the interval. So that's the other thing. We also asked, so what is the best theory, traditional theory, that predicts pricing and not going into anyone? We tested a number of the best models by Barian, 1980. It's a mixed strategy pricing, it's an equilibrium model. And then we did some calculations. If the dealers would have read economic literature and used the best fitting model there, how much money would have been made? Because then it's the ultimate question. So does this, because usually people say heuristics, they are because dealers are cognitively impaired, and so they have to pay a price for that. So that's the story. What we found is, you see the red bar is the red strategy before, the most frequent strategy, the green bar, the green, and the blue bar is the constant. Each of these makes, in this model, considerably more money than trying to fine-tune all the time. And fine-tune in a world of very keen fine-tune of uncertainty. So this example illustrates a few things. It's about research questions. So go into the real world, observe how real businesses make decisions, and then don't come up with an as-if model, but try to understand how they are making that. And you will find, in this case, individual differences between all among the satisficing family, and then you can see how they adapt their strategy to the situation in their arm. What we found is the most impact is how long they keep the price. And that depends on whether they're in a rural area or an urban area, how many competitors there are, and a few other things. So that's the idea. And also, the example also shows that we should not think that using simple strategies in an uncertain world results in less profit. No. If anything, here it's the opposite. So here's the research program. It has three questions. First, what is the adaptive toolbox? So these are the heuristic strategies that people use or institutions use. And we can decompose them in building blocks. Building blocks in the satisficing strategies is first, how high is your initial price, how long you hold, and then how far you're going down. That's on the building block. And in many cases, that's the capacities of people that explode. I will get to that. And the ecological rationality question is a prescriptive question. The first one is descriptive, the prescriptive. And the prescriptive question has never been asked about heuristics before. In the Kahneman program, it is a non-starter because he always believes that logic, probability theory is the best, and the heuristic is second best. You don't have to ask a prescriptive question. And the uncertainty, that's not correct. That's only correct on the risk. And so we need to analyze the environments where this heuristics works. And a good start is to look at actual decision making in institutions. And instead of blaming people that are cognitively impaired, we have a dangerous business of people, academics, who know nothing or close to nothing about a certain business, but pretend that they know better. And that's a typical characteristic. So, for instance, remember the hot hen fallacy, where smart psychologists pretended to know better than coaches, and players. And it has been going through the literature. It's about the situation that basketball players sometimes get a hot hand, and in which basically every coach and every player believes, but then a study analyzed that actually the probabilities after a hit and after a no hit getting merciless are the same. And it has taken now about 20 years until some smart colleagues from Bocconi University, Georgia Miller is one of them, have shown that the original studies had miscalculated the thing, and there's actually a hot hand there. And this is just an example, and I can tell you the details there, but be aware if anyone claims that you're an idiot. There are experts who don't know what they're doing, no question, but not in sports. So if you're this is a country of astrology. Yeah? So in Germany, I would use the astrologers as a country, but here we're just polite, and use maybe stock forecasters, which are known, they have no ability to do it, but then you need them, of course they need to claim it, because otherwise there's no customers. The last time here at the leadership lecture, I showed an analysis I did of the predictions of exchange rates. They're hilarious, they're useless, but they're done every year for other reasons, because there's a demand. And the demand is not in order to get better predictions, the demand is to get rid of responsibility. So I, as a CEO, I don't want to make this decision, what to make a predict could be wrong, so I just give the money to the Deutsche Bank and they produce another useless prediction. But it's not my fault, that's what it happens. So, adaptive toolbox. So here is a quote by Reinhard Selten, and he remarks on the as-if models. He says, there is no probability and utility book in the brain which can be looked up like a telephone directory, which is what most theories that have a function between money and your subjective, your utility, whatever it is, assume that somehow we look that up if you take them as process models. And of course, that's not how it works. So here is what I'll do now. I'll focus on methodology and give you one more example about a heuristic now of a different kind. It's not a satisficing heuristic, but a one-reason decision-making. One-reason decision-making is the extreme version of not using information. So if you think about big data, on one hand, we're going in the other direction. So assume you have a large company which has a customer base of 100,000 of customers that have previously bought products that you know. Now you have a special order, you want to send out catalogs, you want to send out information, but you don't want to send this to customers who will never buy from you. So they're called inactive. The question is, how can we predict which customers will be active in the future and which not? That's the question. It's again about the future. It's highly uncertain. There's no way to know that. But there's a way to do better than chance. And then the question is, which method? Just think a moment how you would do that. So it's lots of money involved, because if you send your catalogs to everyone, it costs lots of money. So there are basically two visions about it, like everywhere. One is, it's a complex problem, it needs a complex solution. And that's a typical vision that we find. And within that, there are two visions. You do with an optimization algorithm, or you do big data. That also needs an algorithm. So here is the typical model in the marketing literature, complex solution for a complex problem. This is just one of several, but one of the most prominent one, the Pareto negative binomial distribution model. How do? You make an assumption about the purchases. Now, the distribution. Here in this case, Poisson distribution. You make an assumption about consumer lifetimes, you make assumptions about a number of things, and then you make your models, and then you calculate what would be the best thing. Here is I'm not going through the math, but I hope it impresses you, because you don't understand it. So that's the one way, and that's a very typical way. But note that we are now in a world of uncertainty. We don't know whether any of these assumptions ever hold. We don't know whether these probability distributions mean anything. So that's one. The other way is the different one. You go into the real world and start observing how experienced managers actually make these decisions. That's a way to learn. And in the study that I'm presenting here, there were three large companies, and the managers used all a variant of the same heuristic. And it is called the hiatus heuristic. If a customer hasn't purchased within 9 months, classify as inactive, otherwise as active. This is a heuristic from the large group of one good reason heuristic. Everything is ignored. And that's part of a definition of a heuristic. A heuristic is basically the art, or heuristic decision making is the art of focusing on the 1, 2, or 3 important cues and ignoring the rest. That's what it is. Because one wants to have a robust method that is robust against the many possibilities in the future, rather than fine-tuned methods that will be wrong anyhow because the future will not be like that. So here we have now a way how to do research. Now you have two hypotheses: the Pareto binomial distribution model and the heuristic. What we can do next is,
Can I ask now? Or?
Yeah, ask now.
So, in one rule heuristic or one rule decision making, does intuition also come? I mean, when managers make decisions based on intuition.
Yes, it's a way. So intuition is, I define intuition as the unconscious use of heuristics. So if the manager doesn't know what he's doing, so he cannot explain it, it would be intuition. But the point is, the same heuristic that's used intuitively can also be used consciously. So there's really no difference.
Because I read somewhere that intuition is the highest level of experience-based decision. Like when we have highest level, a lot of experience, then only one can make good intuitive decisions. So that involves some conscious level decisions.
Yeah. So almost all experts make intuitive decisions, and there's nothing wrong about that. But the question is, can we model these intuitive decisions? And these are all models of that, and we might go in there. So for the research, we have now two hypotheses as opposed to one. That's very important, because in much of research in the social sciences, people test only one hypothesis, and often they never formulate it. They test it against the null and knock down the null and claim victory. This is not science. This is kindergarten. So to do science, you need to precise about your own hypothesis, and actually then test it against another precise hypothesis. There we have two, and two different ones. One is built on the ideals of optimization and complex property. The other one is taken from the real world. But now you can test them, because you never know what the managers do. It's really better than what they should do. And actually, this particular study here was conducted by two professors of business who actually believe that the manager should do the complex calculations. But to their credit, they went out. They didn't just write about that they're stupid and cognitive limitation. They tested it. What did they find? Here's the result. One of the business was an airline, and the Pareto negative binomial distribution model predicted 74% correct. That's much better than Keynes. The simple heuristic, 77. This is called a less is more effect. You do better with less calculation information. The Pareto negative binomial distribution model has everything that the simple heuristic has in common, but it performs less. And the reason is, I will get to this, in the ecological rationality. But now let's just look. You find the same thing in the apparel business and in the CD Now, that's on the internet business. It's just the same. You just save all the time and effort of doing the calculation. So note one thing. If, as many social scientists have proceeded, they only would have tested their own model, Pareto negative binomial distribution industrial, they would have found it significantly better. And it is a great model. You need to do competitive testing. Yeah? Test your own theory against the best competitors. And likely a very different one, not take another variable out of the same type of model. And then you may find like that. So the Florian Bangenheim has since studied another 24 or so businesses and just replicated the finding again and again and again and again. What does it tell us? It tells us, in terms of research methodology, go into the real world, take a problem. So both of the examples given, and get it into the laboratory or study it exactly. And then formulate 2 models at least that you test, not one. Forget about null hypothesis testing and p-values and all these things. Right? So do science. And test them not in how well they fit the data that's already known, but predict. These are predictions. So you use these heuristics and then you wait, predict what's happening. Or if you have the data, then you use the first 6 months and then predict for the answers. And the difference between data fitting and prediction is enormous and underappreciated. If you have the data already and fit your regression model on that or any other model, that's data fitting. It's not prediction. And you will be, you explained org, will be the higher, the more free parameters you add on that. This is not science. This is just mathematics you can add. We had an elephant today at the beginning of the thing. John von Neumann is known for having said, with 4 free parameters, I can draw an elephant. And with 5, I can wiggle its tail. Making fun of the business of free parameters. And amazingly, the social sciences appear the only ones who do the business of free parameters. Like prospect theory has 5 free parameters. In physics, you don't play the game of free parameters. You want to measure your parameters precisely. So G is not kept as a free parameter in every physical experiment to be fitted in order to increase the fit. No, it's measured and it's kept until after maybe half a century it's changed a little bit, but the idea is to measure it precisely rather than to keep it open. So that, yeah, that's the key. So the same holds for heuristics and big data analytics. We have a question here.
So my question is, how do you decide on parameters? For example, in the earlier thing, when you said that why didn't the customers buy a product, you were saying that if I see the customer doesn't buy my product for 9 months,
Yeah.
I'm going to call them as inactive, right? But if I flip the point and see the parameter is not the customer buying it, but I forgot to sell, I actually didn't pursue the customer. So the parameter changes here from customer buying it to me selling to a customer. actively selling to a customer?
Yeah.
Right.
Well, it's a good question. So how do we find the parameters? That's your question. And actually in the seed in our business, it was not 9 months, but 7 months.
Okay.
So the first is how do managers find the parameters? So they'll probably do this by learning from feedback and experience. And interestingly, they're always round. So they wouldn't say 9 months minus 1 day, because they know that there's no more precision possible there. How do scientists find parameters? Another version of your question. So in that case, the hiatus, which is the only parameter, is taken from the managers. But then you can run your analysis, which is also done here, but I haven't gone into it, see whether you can find even better parameters than the managers use. That's it. But then you also need to answer the question whether this better is then not also overfitting, actually robust in the future. In the extreme, there are heuristics. So if you just go with 9 months and not estimate the parameter from your data, then you have a heuristic with 0 free parameters. That's the real challenging thing. But as you have seen with Satisficing, it has basically 3 parameters that, but not much of them are used actually by the companies, and they adapt them. So here are the comparison with big data analytics. So big data analytics is the extreme opposite of simple heuristics. And so the simple heuristics are first fast and frugal. Only a few cues are used as opposed to thousands. That's a big difference. And again, the question is not which is better. The question is which is better in what environment. And also, don't be impressed by books by Victor Schönberger and so on, Meyer Schönberger, which claim that big data is always better. It's a nonsense. Big data is suited to a few situations, that's very good, but fails in most predictive situations. For instance, I do not know a single success in medicine. Big data is good in data fitting, so explaining the past. And that's why it's very good for spying on everyone, what you did. But spying is not the same as predicting. And you basically need the same. The more a world is like this, stable, the future is like the past, the better the success for big data. But in situations like health or so, there is at least no success I know. So think about Google's flu trend. So Google had announced in 2009 in a Nature article that they can predict the spread of flu in the US, which is something very useful. Have you followed up this research? Meanwhile, they stopped the program because it never worked. So they've overworked it for many times, and the key problems are in this case that nobody knows what the algorithm really is. We know there are maybe 50 cues, but nobody knows what the cues are. It's all proprietary, you cannot test it. But the good thing about Google flu trends was that they actually made predictions. And you could see this, that it didn't work. And why they don't work is very clear. For instance, because big data analytics is the blind search in correlations. There's no theory, no knowledge, like the managers have. There's no causality. And for instance, the first problem was when they started to make prediction in 2009. So the data that the producer was also, the flu is high in the winter and down in the summer and so on. Then swine flu came out of the season, and of course, big data also came hope that the future is like the past, and if it isn't, it flops. Causal thinking can help you in this situation. So the first difference is the amount of information taken in, and also it allows you as a decision maker with a heuristic to make fast heuristic and not wait for your big data analysis. And second, transparency, which is very important. A heuristic is easy to understand. So if you go in the hospital, look at the smell, look at the patients, look at the nurses, you know what you do. But a deep neural network is very hard to understand. And we have today situations where in the US, where the neural networks are used, or whatever it's being used, because you don't know it, because it's business secrets. Some algorithms used to predict whether you, if you are a defendant, will commit another crime. And judges now use this information. They get some probability. And if you have ever worked with judges, you know they're probability blind. I've trained in the US, the best group of them, the federal judges, but you can imagine how they have no training in probability. And they get a number, 95%. And they do not know where it's coming from. It's a proprietary, it's not a transparent algorithm. But they think they have to use it, and of course it influences their judgments. So this is the situation in which we're going, that by the spread of big data algorithms that are non-transparent because of technical reasons, like in a deep neural network, and also non-transparent because of it's a business product. People start using things they don't understand, nobody can understand, and if you're put in jail because of an algorithm, you can complain, and you will never know why. And most important, the problem is that we do not know how good they are in the first place. And Google Flu Trends was an exception, but one could find it out. So transparency is a problem here, and then the scientific method. And this is a really important point. We are in a situation now where more and more businesses take over what scientists should have done or had previously done. So while what I showed you in this research, you can do independent tests of the satisficing thing. You can do independent tests which are only about the other heuristic I showed you. You can't do that with big data because you don't even know what this Google Flu algorithm is, or what Watson is doing. And also, if there are numbers in big data analytics, it's often about data fitting, not about prediction, or you don't know, never will find out. And it's almost never against any competitor. So only later, one has found out that the Google Flu predictions could have done much better by a much simpler method. So these are the key issues that I worry about, that we lose control in the scientific methods are no longer used, and actually some proponents of big data actually claim that we don't need any causation anymore, only correlation. We don't need to know anything about the subject matter, but just to find correlations. And that's a big drawback. It's not how it will work. And we are wasting many money, particularly in medicine, for probably useless technologies, instead of using this money to pay nurses a better salary. And so a word on, you may have heard on Watson. So Watson who won Jeopardy, so IBM's Watson. And there was a huge fuss a few years ago that Watson will now do personalized medicine. It's now called precision medicine. Personalized medicine didn't work. You use a new term. That's basically what's happening. And N.H. Anderson, one of the most respected cancer centers in the US, has invested $62 million into Watson, and 2 years ago they stopped it. because they found out after investing this money that IBM's Watson is not better than any average doctor, just more expensive. Didn't deliver anything. And it's again, it's a world of uncertainty. Where Gooby flu, trends fail, where Watson fails, you need other methods. And you need to dare to go away from the idea that complex methods always need complex solutions. Okay, ecological rationality, I will be short on that. That's the study about identifying the situations where a certain heuristic works and where it doesn't work. The classical theory about why people use heuristic, that's the Kahneman theory, is that there is an accuracy-effort trade-off. Meaning, a heuristic requires less effort than complex methods, which is true. Therefore, you pay a price. It's less accurate, which is false. So that is only true in a world of risk. It's not true in a world of uncertainty. And I've given you a few examples just to illustrate it. But it's still belief. And the more unkind version is the cognitive illusions version. So people use heuristic, therefore they're somehow irrational. That's the more kind version. And you find it still in Kahneman's Thinking Fast and Slow book. Technically, the situation is the total error you make with any prediction method is composed of a bias and a noise. Noise is the measurement error we cannot do anything about. Bias is the entire emphasis of the heuristic biases program, and it's basically the difference between whatever your method predicts and the real state. And that would be true under risk. But if you go in the real world, the uncertainty is no longer true. And here, the situation is different. Its best characterization is the bias-variance trade-off, where you have one more component. The total error is, as before, a bias component, a noise, but also variance. And variance is also known in the social sciences of overfitting. So it's the dependence of your result on the specific sample you got. So here's a simple illustration of bias and variance. So there are two dot boards. On the left side, the player has a systematic bias. It's too low and too much to the right, but a little variance. So variance is the darts, the position of the darts, the variability around the mean. So if you think in statistical terms, these are all samples from the same population, but they have small variance, but they all just have bias. And the bias is defined between both sides and the mean of the dot. That's the variance. So variance and bias. On the right side, this player has no bias. On average, the dots are in the bullseye on average. But lots of variance. And so that means that the individual sample means, which are the dots, they depend highly on the sample you have. So if you have small samples, that's one of these things. And you can see here by this illustration that if you count the rings, you do better with bias than with no bias, if the variance is so much stronger. So that's the thing. In human terms, to mean a brain should have the ability to somehow balance a bias, that means being stubborn, not learning, against a variability, being sensitive on new information. And that's the problem. The problem is not the bias. Actually, as you can see, usually there is a dilemma between the both. A heuristic that has no free parameters has no bias. It is insensitive to any samples. See that? But a heuristic that has no free parameter, that has no variance. It may have a bias, may have a higher bias, but no variance it doesn't get because it's not dependent on it doesn't overfit. A complex method like multiple regression with many parameters will have or may have a smaller bias, but I think Oscar will tell you in the next stage that often the difference is not very much between the heuristic and complex method, but it will lead to larger variance if the sample sizes are small or if there are a number of parameters. The conditions are important for statistical theory. The point is just to make clear, by simplifying, you reduce the variance, the trending. You may increase the bias, but the problem is not getting rid of bias and having complex models with lots of free parameters. That's not the winning situation. So here are the three ways to decrease bias, so the bias component. So the first one is to have equal weights. I haven't given you an example for that. So if you think about a regression, you estimate the beta weights, but you can do it differently. You can also do equal weights. And it's not always, if you have a situation where in hindsight, if you fit data, you always do better with calculating better weights, but not necessarily in prediction. Robin Dawes has shown this long ago. So ignore the weights of reason. The second one are one reason heuristics. I gave you an example, the hiatus heuristic. So ignore the reasons. Get rid of them. And the third one are lexicographic heuristics. I haven't given you an example, but Konstantinos will talk about fast-moving trees later. Towards the end, I'll give you a simple example from finance. I work with the Bank of England on a project how to make the world of finance safer using heuristics instead of Basel III or any of the typical method. And one of the first things that Andy Haldane and we calculated is the situation. Could one predict the failing of banks before 2008-7 by the regular so risk-based capital ratios that are basically weighted, or if you just use unweighted leverage ratios. So that's now the first step. And here is the result of that. These are all the big banks, and on the left side you see an analysis. The red banks are those who failed by a certain criteria. The blue ones are in good shape. And this is based on what's used in Basel 3 and 2, so the risk-weighted thing. You see there is not much in it in differentiation. On the right side, there are basically almost as many red ones as blue ones. Now, if you use an unweighted average, that's called leverage ratio, you can see here by eye that on the right side you have most of the blue ones. So the higher the leverage ratio, the less likely that it blows up. On the left side, the higher the risk weighted, right? So you don't see that clear thing. Yeah? That's another illustration that in the world of finance, which is certainly a world of uncertainty, if you, instead of making things more complex, what's constantly happening, make it more simple, you can actually predict that. And for the same principles. So for those of you who are not in finance, but you may have heard of the financial crisis, it may have hit you, 2007, and also the measurements that have been taken by the central banks. They are called Basel I, Basel II, Basel III, we are now Basel III. And just by pages. You see, the solution was making the regulations ever more complex. Basel 1 had 30 pages, Basel 2 had over 300 pages, Basel 3 over 600 pages. And the rest goes with that. And complex calculations. And they have not, for instance, the value at risk complications, that are Basel 2 and 3, have not recognized any crisis, not prevented, none, and they will not, for the same reason. Because one uses mathematics that is wonderful for a world of risk in a world of uncertainty. Instead of daring to systematically study how we should deal with uncertainty. So finally, the intuitive design, I will skip that a lot because contributors will talk about that and come to the end of the talk. I was talking today about the following points. Risk, a situation of risk is not one of uncertainty. And most situations have components of both. And we did very carefully in not just using the models that are fit for risk and answer. That's also one of the most, I think, the most frequent errors that's being done in applying this. Second, how can we build up a systematic theory about how to deal with uncertainty? And here, I've talked about the adaptive toolbox. So to study how actual people make decisions, how they can do better, and a systematic study of heuristics. And that study has also a prescriptive or normative component, how to find out in what situation less is more, and when the opposite holds. And formally, all of that depends on using the scientific methods, using formal models, and using competitive testing, and also predictions rather than just data fitting. So that's the key program. And if you dare join this and go away from studying certain simple problems that people make themselves, like experimental games or lotteries and so on, that have their value, but it's very limited. And there, to have an understanding of a rational theory of heuristic that takes uncertainty serious and takes heuristic seriously. Thank you for your attention. Time for questions, huh?
Okay. So in the middle of the talk, you mentioned about...
You have an entire page. Do you want to come up here?
No, it's just a question. Okay, so in the middle of the talk, you mentioned about astrology, Indians following astrology. So I don't know about entire India, but I've seen people around me who actually use astrology as one of the parameters to make some big decisions in life, like marriage. So what would you like to tag these people? Are they irrational, or they are following some kind of heuristics to actually arrive at this decision?
It is certainly a heuristic if you just reduce and complex. The data I know about us, I don't want to hurt your feelings because I do not know how many of you have used in your own marriage decisions astrology. So, but I do not know any data that astrology can predict. But there's another aspect of these important decisions under uncertainty. If whatever criteria gives you confidence that the decision is the right one, then that may actually improve the future. And if you believe in astrology and then believe that your husband is the right match for you, look at him with a different eye. And most of the things that people do can be interpreted in a positive, negative way. In the same way, you have a culture, unlike which is now in the Western, where parents have the say in choice, partner choice. That is almost gone in Europe. And in the same way, a very reasonable argument can be made, I think a better argument than astrology, that your parents have experience. And they're also trying to protect yourself from all kind of things, and that this is a valuable information. And so all of this is now about the interaction between that by using a certain method, you actually change the outcomes. That's very important. So my take on astrology is, I don't think you could easily get rid of it for all astrologies. Just listen to your parents or someone who has experience. I would skip the person with the astrology part.
To add something on that, just in case it helps. Once I saw an interview by Noam Chomsky on astrology, I mean, it was a small segment, and he said he doesn't think it's rational. He didn't say it's irrational, but he said he doesn't think it's rational, but he thinks it's meaningful. So that's a little bit like what Gerd said, it can create some meaning. It can actually facilitate reasoning and decision making.
Just a comment on that. When I was getting married, my wife's and my horoscopes or whatever, they did not match so well. So we decided to just postpone my birth time by a few hours and everything matched.
That sounds like a free variable.
So it's a thing. Personally, I would not base any of my decision on astrology. But if that's the question. And on the other hand, there are what you described. That you then use a certain kind of theory, but if it really doesn't work, you twist around it. There are good examples. For instance, I mean, time is over the entire thing. Okay, let's take the last question. Let's give this example. Yeah, sorry. Maybe you can all ask you 3 questions and I'll answer them.
So my question was about how do you get to know people's heuristics? Does an interview reveal that? And how do you then, I mean, because their heuristics are something which have worked in the past. So how do you forward predict?
The question that answer short, so he is not unhappy.
So how do you
know it? So there are various ways. One is going to the world, like I did, and ask. Oh, and then check it. Second, we know already many heuristics. We need to study them systematically. Third, we in my group, I always had animal biologists who study how animals make decisions. And we have found that none of heuristics that people use just like animals use. There's many things. Then next question.
I have a question about the alternate hypothesis or the multiple ways to test things you mentioned. So how do you counter, for example, reviewers or scholars or peers when they say, when you do alternate hypothesis testing, you're actually not so aware of your own theory that what you're predicting. So for example, if you're going to predict that effort is going to do, focus on effort saving is going to do one thing, or it could alternatively be your focus on accuracy, improving accuracy is going to do this. And then you're testing both, so you have these alternate hypotheses, but the argument from them is, well, you're not sure about your own theory. You have to have one and walk your way through it. So how do you counter that kind of an argument with your experience?
If your point is that there are people who are sure about their own theory, without doubt, that's probably not scientists you're talking about. Maybe
What viewers? Viewers, yeah.
Yeah, no. And I mean, first, we have a disease in social sciences called null hypothesis testing, where, as I said before, the typical thing is you never are precise about your own hypothesis, you only test a null, which is typically no difference, and then you claim it. That's a disease that should be eradicated. Good science starts from theoretical dispositions, has some models that show you a few. They can be complex, they can be simple, and then you go out and test them. And you specify your own alternative in order to see how well it captures reality, rather than specifying it. And even better, you specify not only your hypothesis, but also a good alternative, and see which one goes better. This is science. But it's rarely done in the social sciences. And people claim, we have no specific hypothesis, then get one. There are many out there, and often it's the other way around. By focus on this non-hypothesis testing, you never are forced to specify your own ideas. And that was maybe the last one.
So you said that heuristic decision making is the art of making decisions where you consider one or two cues as sufficient, which is better than analyzing everything. What I'm wondering is, if this is the approach, how would you get to the idea of having a framework or a model, or because then you would run into a taxonomy problem where you will want to study each situation, each context. So how does one get to the idea of theorizing from the heuristic perspective?
Okay, so your question is, does one need to study every situation again? Precise, yeah?
Yeah.
No. We need to find the main features of situations. And a main fine-tuning in the future is by definition not knowable unless you think about lotteries or playing the casino where it will be tomorrow like today. So there is also no point to think about fine-tuning the future, but you need to understand the real important big dimension, or here are some. So the key dimension we started on, is it one of risk or uncertainty? Is it a situation that is in the past as opposed to the future? It's linked to that. So much of the theorizing is actually about the past. Just look in the articles, even in economic journals. There is mostly only data feeding. Everything is known already. You explain it from, it's called hindsight. That's not great. But these are too important. The more you are in the future and under uncertainty, it will be a heuristic business. You need to simple it down. Then I showed you the darts, and behind the darts is statistical theory. If you have small samples, then don't try to have models, complicated models, because you will overfit. If you have many parameters, then you also tend to overfit. So there are a number of things, and I think Oscar may give you some examples of situations where you can very generally argue that, for instance, one good reason decision making will be likely as good or superior to complex ones, for instance. So think in terms of multiple regression. So you have a choice, say, logistic regression between two. If the first Q or predictor has a better weight, say of 1, and the second of 0.5, and the next one of 0.25 is exponentially decreasing, you can simply see that just relying on this one reason can never be taught by any linear model, period. So, and these situations where the additional contribution of new information adds up very much. So these are all structural things where you can have I mentioned now 3 or 4, where you can try to understand in what situation one is probably better advised to rely on less information and what kind of heuristic. Again, we always are uncertain about that, because the future is not knowable, but we can say. So we can make ecological rationality statements of that kind. If these situations hold, then it's better to do a lexicographic heuristic or something else. So particularly in this book, you will find a number of analysis, precise analysis of the ecological rationality conditions. And in that workshop here in the Winter Institute, you will learn many more. But the most important thing is you need to learn to ask new kinds of questions. And that's the scissors type of question. And don't be encouraged if someone says, oh, that's too complicated. It's not too complicated. It's just that almost nobody asks the question. People are more willing to make very complicated models of internal processes without overfitting and fine-tuning. Fine-tuning is, and you also need to avoid fine-tuning in the ecological rationality. So you get the big dimensions, and then you can say, good, look, in this situation I would rather go find out what is the best reason and just go with that. Master of time, it's your time. Thank you for your attention and ask many, many, many questions. Don't waste any time. And the more questions you have, the better. And I had the experience last year that unlike, can I say, the average UK student, you have many more questions. And that's a huge advantage. It may have to do with your society, probably maybe even with astrology, but but it's a gift to have questions. And also it's a sign of courage, because the question always means I don't understand something, and it's a sign of curiosity. Just go on like that. Thank you very much.